Hi folks, I've made this video to help introduce you to your periodic table so that you can color along as we go through this and you can be introduced to the different vocabulary words that we will use associated with the periodic table. So the first thing I want you to notice is that your periodic table has 118 elements on it, and each element has its own box. So let's look at the information that is contained in each box. The first thing I want you to notice is already circled here, is the atomic number, the number at the top of each box. That tells you the number of protons that atoms of that element have. So if an element is carbon, it has 6 protons. And if you have an atom with 6 protons, you know that it is carbon. The next piece of information that we have here is the element symbol. The element symbol is always either one letter or 2 letters. If it's one letter, that one letter is capitalized. And if it's 2 letters, you have a capital letter followed by a lowercase letter. It is important to follow this convention and copy the element symbol exactly as you find it on the periodic table because capitals and lowercases matter. Let me give you an example. If I have capital C, capital O, that means I have an atom of carbon and an atom of oxygen, which come together to form carbon monoxide. On the other hand, if I have capital C, lowercase o, that is element number 27 on the periodic table, cobalt. So the capitals and lowercases are important. If you change them, you can change the meaning of what it is you are trying to write. The next piece of information we have on the periodic table is the actual name of the element, so you can be certain that you've got the right symbol for the right name. And lastly, we have the atomic mass on the periodic table. Now, this atomic mass is different to the mass number that we will also talk about in class. Mass number and atomic mass are not the same. The atomic mass is a weighted average of the mass of all of the different isotopes that occur naturally of an element. We'll talk about that more in class. Just know for now that the atomic mass is on the periodic table, not the mass number, which we will also talk about in class. So let's look at starting to label and color in our periodic table. The first thing I want you to label on your periodic table are the groups. Groups are these vertical columns on the periodic table. They go up and down, and we have 18 groups for you to label. If you need to pause the video so that you can number those 1 through 18, then please do so. But I'm going to continue, so just pause the video whenever you need an extra minute or two. The next thing I want you to label on your periodic table are the periods. The periods are the horizontal rows on the periodic table. These are numbered 1 through 7. We have 7 horizontal rows on the periodic table, 7 periods. However, notice that there are 2 extra rows on the periodic table. These are not separate periods. This first row that begins with lanthanum is called the lanthanide series, and because lanthanum has the atomic number 57, this row of elements actually slots into the periodic table here next to barium in this gap on the periodic table. Similarly, actinium, which has the atomic number 89, slots into this position on the periodic table. So this row that begins with actinium is actually in period 7 on the periodic table. Why do we have those 2 rows at the bottom of the periodic table? Well, our periodic table would look like this. If we put the lanthanide series where it actually belongs on the periodic table, and the actinide series, where it actually belongs on the periodic table, we would have an incredibly wide periodic table that would either need to be really small to fit it on a piece of paper, in which case you wouldn't actually be able to read the periodic table, or you would need a really skinny but wide piece of paper to fit all of this information on. So it's just easier to have those 2 rows at the bottom of the periodic table, making the periodic table easier to read. These next few slides with this different style of periodic table are for my honor students. My non-honor students are welcome to watch this as well, but the labels that we're putting on here are for my honor students. I would like you to know which elements are solids, liquids, gases, and which ones are synthetically made. So here I've labeled just the gases so far. They're mostly here on the right side of the periodic table, all of group 18, fluorine and chlorine, oxygen and nitrogen. And also don't forget hydrogen over here. There are just two elements that are liquids at room temperature. We have mercury with the atomic number of 80 and bromine with the atomic number of 35. Everything else on the periodic table is a solid, but we're not going to use the solid symbol for everything else on the periodic table because we're only going to use the solid symbol for these naturally occurring solids. So everything with a cube symbol here is a naturally occurring solid on the periodic table. Notice that technetium and promethium here do not have a cube symbol on them, but everything else up to element number 89 does. The rest of those elements we're going to fill in with this green symbol, which means synthetic. Now, in reality, you can find elements up through number 94 in nature, but you find them in such trace amounts that if you are a scientist who actually wants to study one of these elements, you need to synthesize the element in order to obtain a large enough quantity to actually do anything with. Okay, we're back to the old periodic table, so this bit is for everyone. The next thing I want you to label on your periodic table are the metals. The metals are on the left side of the periodic table. Notice that most of the elements on the periodic table are metals. The vast majority of the elements are metals. So everything to the left of this kind of zigzag staircase is a metal, with the exception of hydrogen. Do not color hydrogen in yellow. As you're doing this coloring in, please also fill in this key, this legend for your coloring as you go along so that you'll be able to remember what each of your colors mean. We're going to look at some of these sets of metals in more detail. So the first set of metals I want to look at in more detail are the alkali metals. The alkali metals are here in group 1, everything except for hydrogen. And I want you to add red stripes to those metals to let you know that those are alkali metals. And similarly, add a red stripe on your key so that you remember which ones mean alkali metals. The next set of metals that I'd like for you to know about are the alkaline earth metals. This is the special name for group 2. And so we're going to add orange stripes to those. And in case your red and orange are maybe close together in color, it's maybe hard to tell the difference, I just made my stripe going a different direction just so that I could tell, hey, this color is red and this color is orange. The next set of metals that I'd like you to label separately are the transition metals. I want you to add an orange box around the transition metals. It's this dip in the periodic table, everything in groups 3 through 12. Also, I'd like you to add labels to this, this region of the periodic table. I'd like you to write 3D in front of scandium, 4D in front of yttrium, 5D in front of hafnium, and 6D in front of rutherfordium. Next, I want you to label the lanthanide metals. I want you to add dark brown stripes on the lanthanide metals, and I also want you to add a label in front of lanthanum that says 4F. For the actinide series, I want you to add light brown stripes. Again, just to accentuate the difference between the light brown and the dark brown, I had my stripes going in another direction, but that is your call. Add light brown stripes and add the label 5F in front of actinium. Okay, we're done talking about metals for now. Now we're moving on to nonmetals, and we're going to use blue to represent the nonmetals. So everything here to the right of the zigzag on the periodic table will be colored blue, but don't forget to go over here and color in hydrogen also with the light blue color. We're going to look at some of these nonmetal groups in more detail now. So The first group of nonmetals that I want to talk about is group 18. These are the noble gases, and I'd like you to add purple stripes to those noble gases in group 18. And again, remember to keep up with your legend as you go along so you remember what those purple stripes mean. Next, with the halogens. Halogens are group 17. I'd like you to add blue stripes to those elements there in group 17. Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, astatine, and tennessine. We're done with the special groups of nonmetals now. So the next color we're going to use is I'd like you to color in these 7 elements on the periodic table that are right on the zigzag staircase portion. Color those in green to represent the metalloids. Metalloids are elements that have properties of both metals and nonmetals. Please color those green. Now we're going to start talking about different blocks on the periodic table, We'll talk about the meaning of these blocks in class. Right now I just want you to have the regions labeled on your periodic table because it will make discussing them in class more easy. The S block is groups 1 and 2. I'd like you to use a pink highlighter or just kind of go around them in the color pink to represent the S block. And remember to update your legend as well. In addition to groups 1 and 2, helium is also in the S block. So please also put a pink box around helium. The next block I want you to label is called the P block. This region of the periodic table is over here on the right-hand side. It's groups 13 through 18, although it does not include helium because helium was in the S block. So please put a blue box, perhaps using blue highlighter, around that box, around that region of the periodic table. Remember to update your legend. The D block on the periodic table, we've actually already labeled the D block. The D block is the same as the transition metals. It's this orange box that we put on the periodic table before, this orange box. And so we can just update the legend. We don't have to actually add anything on the periodic table because it's already been done. And lastly, the F block on the periodic table. Please draw a green box around the lanthanide and actinide series here at the bottom of the periodic table. We call that region the F block. In case I didn't say it enough times, make sure that you have an accurate legend that reflects all the colors that you added to the periodic table. And I'd also like you to add these 4 unofficial group names. We've already talked about the alkali metals, the alkaline earth metals, the noble gases, and the halogens. Groups 13, 14, 15, and 16 don't have really super official names, but in class we will refer to group 13 as the aluminum family because that's where aluminum is. We'll call group 14 the carbon family, 15 will be the nitrogen family, and 16 will be the oxygen family. So this is what your periodic table should look like when you finished.